people called us like the Huxtables, being that one black family on the block.
I come from a family of 4. I have 4 siblings. Well, actually, I have 19 siblings, but that's another story.
I think it was like 6 weeks before we saw a black person on the street. We made my dad stop the car. We got out as a family and shook his hand. He thought we were crazy.
Don't hate me for what I'm about to say.
In terms of being African Canadian,
we don't talk about First Nations.
The spirit of my people has always been one where we overcome obstacles. I remember listening to conversations that my parents would have, and it would be, things where, if it didn't snow on Christmas, people blamed the immigrants for bringing heat. And things that were just so absurd, but these were things that they had to hear and deal with from their co-workers where they were being blamed for the weather.
I didn't have the pressures of conformity as my siblings who were immigrants, or my parents, right? So things like, speaking proper, don't speak patois, don't really play up to your Jamaican culture. My, immigrant parents, they all get that message. I didn't have those struggles, but I watched my siblings going through those struggles.
I grew up hearing the experiences that my parents were having, even if I didn't fully, understand. And I think that is part of what, led to them, always telling my sister and I that, we have to work twice as hard as everybody else.
Growing up, like many Caribbean parents, like your education was it. I was, for the most part, an A student or at very least a B+ student. I had a friend who was white. She was a C student, and there's 2 schools that we could have gone to for high school. One was in a white neighborhood and very white and very rich. And then the other one was this kind of working class high school. And the guidance counselor told my friend, you're going to this very white, rich high school, despite the fact that her grades were not as such. And we live across the street from each other, so there was no geographic difference. And I was told that I would be going to this very working class high school. And, my parents, luckily my parents had that analysis. They didn't necessarily say this is racism, but they went and they talked to the guidance counselor. And for me, it became very clear about the difference of my skin color.
I never told my parents anything about what was going on. I mean, I did see stuff that was happening, and we never talked about it. My father was a very slight man, very small, maybe he weighed 140, 50 pounds, short, and the men on the base had a nickname for him. They used to call him LBJ, like Little Black Joe. And that would incense my mother, and I would hear them have fights about it, but we never talked about it. I just knew that my mother was angry about things that were happening around my dad. And my dad never talked to us about his life and the racism that he faced. And so, we were just we were on our own.
I had the great fortune of being able to travel out west and live for a couple of years with my family in British Columbia. And that was a very enriching experience because it really taught me a lot about the Canadian landscape and how very different life is in Western Canada versus the metropole of Toronto. And so what resonated for me in Western Canada was being amongst First Nations and Aboriginal people, and actually having that discourse at home, but then going to school and being around the chiefs or going on the weekends to talk to so-and-so's dad or so-and-so's mom. We'd have many opportunities to discuss that connection between people's narratives around oppression and what oppression looked like, what it sounded like, what it felt like in different spaces.
When I was growing up, I always harassed my mother about whether or not she was black, because my mom looks like she's white. She looks whiter than some white people, and she could easily pass. Because she grew up in the States, it was just understood that she was black. I mean, most people could tell that she was black because they have some kind of radar that allows them to do that, but they're just well versed in figuring out who's black and who's not and drawing that clear line. So she never had a problem in the States, but when she came to Canada, people didn't really think that she was black. She doesn't look it. And I started to question her too, because people would ask me, are you mixed? Are you black? Your mom's not really black. And what's been really interesting for me now is that I have a 5-year-old son, and lately he's been saying, Mom, you're not really black. And I said, Eden, I am in fact black. And he's like, not like Daddy and I. You know, and he's just had this sort of, and it's funny and alarming to me at the same time, because to me, I look so obviously black, maybe mixed, but definitely black. And so for him to sort of deny me entrance into the club is just, it's surprising. It's surprising that he's aware and thinking in that way already. And it's also a bit of a, I guess, a curse that I inherited from my mom, in that I now understand what it felt like for somebody to say, you're not really who you truly believe you are.